Good morning, everyone. I'm Angelo Castro III.
I'm Angela, and we are the Castros.
We bring you the news.
And the views that make you think.
Sometimes we agree.
Sometimes we don't.
This is News and Views.
And here are today's headlines.
The United States has launched a surprise airstrike on Iran, crippling several nuclear facilities.
Global oil prices rise amid escalating tensions between Israel and Iran.
The 1SAMBAYAN coalition warns nations considering hosting former President Rodrigo Duterte.
An international drug cartel is reportedly behind the seized illegal drugs in Zambales. The United States has launched a surprise airstrike on Iran, crippling several nuclear facilities. The operation, confirmed by President Donald Trump, has triggered swift retaliation from Tehran and raised fears of a wider conflict.
Thick plumes of smoke blanketed the city of Natanz in Iran, following a surprise airstrike by the United States military. 3 major nuclear facilities across Iran were crippled, including the Fordo nuclear facility. The operation was confirmed by U.S. President Donald Trump, who declared the mission a success. He revealed that B-2 bombers led the assault and labeled Iran as the bully of the Middle East.
Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
Trump also extended his gratitude to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, thanking Israel for its close coordination and support.
I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel.
Netanyahu responded with praise of his own, calling the strike a moment that would change history. But just hours later, Iran retaliated, launching a wave of ballistic missiles toward Israeli territory. Iran also sent a letter to the United Nations condemning the U.S. bombings. Additionally, Iran's government announced it would withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, an agreement designed to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Police across the U.S. are now on heightened alert in the wake of the strikes. Iran had long warned that if the U.S. intervened, retaliation would be inevitable. This chain of events began on June 13, when Israel first launched strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, citing a direct threat to its national security.
After a long land journey to Jordan and a connecting flight from Dubai, the 21 government officials who were stranded in Israel finally arrived in Manila on Saturday, June 21. Here's the report.
For over a week now, Iran and Israel have been exchanging ballistic missile attacks. In Israel, where over 30,000 Filipinos live and work, many OFWs said they had experienced conflict before, but this time felt more dangerous.
Nakakatakot. Nagdadasal ako na yung dinadasal ko ay hindi ko na alam anong mga lumalabas sa dinadasal ko. Yung kaba mo iba.
Dati-rati po noon sa pagitan ng Hamas, Hezbollah, laban sa Israel, parang pinapanood lang namin yung mga rockets nila sa taas. Pero sa ngayon, hindi ka pwedeng magbiro.
According to the DMW, 26 OFWs from Israel are expected to arrive in the country on Tuesday morning. They are among the 223 Filipinos who have filed for repatriation. In Iran, more than 20 Filipinos have likewise requested to return home. Authorities noted that despite the ongoing violence, many Filipinos still choose to stay. Since October 2023, just over 1,000 OFWs in Israel have joined the government's repatriation program. Meanwhile, the 21 government officials who were stranded in Israel finally arrived in Manila on Saturday, June 21. They had been attending a seminar when fighting broke out.
Sa bawat pagputok at pagdinig ng sirena, paglabas sa kwarto, kailangan mong katukin ang bawat kwarto para malaman mo na nandoon na sila, kasama mo sila sa pagbaba sa isang litas na lugar.
Talagang nakakatruma po. Kasi pag nakakarinig po kami ng siren, talagang we have only like 60 to 90 seconds para pumunta po sa bunker.
With tensions between Iran and Israel continuing to escalate, what might this mean for the broader region and how could it impact the Indo-Pacific? Now, to help us better understand these developments, we're joined by Don McLean-Hill, a lecturer at DLSU's Department of International Studies. Don, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
All right, Don, let's start off. We all know that Israel and Iran have had their conflict and also with the U.S., but we never expected it to reach to this point. Now, how do you assess the overall impact of the U.S. bombing on Iran?
Well, there are several implications for this. Well, first of all, the complex operations successfully carried out by the U.S. Have illustrated its unrivaled military capabilities. However, I would be surprised if Iran would take this sitting down and negotiate immediately with President Trump, similar to what took place during the Iran-Iraq war. And as you've rightfully mentioned earlier, there were already strikes headed towards Israel. So regime survival is the most vital aspect in Iran's current political dynamics. For the short term, to ensure continuity, Ayatollah Khamenei's legacy, he has already made plans for his potential successors, and he has immediately replaced all targeted officials of Iran with new ones. But for the midterm to the long term, despite saying that they would resume their nuclear program, it wouldn't be that easy given the devastating damages. Nevertheless, with its back against the wall, it is aware, of course, that with the survival of its regime at stake, it may pursue irrational measures that may lead to the detriment of the region. And there are a couple of options that we could look at here. One is choking out the Strait of Hormuz, which carries out at least 20% of global crude trade, but that would also be counterproductive for Iran. Next couple of options would center on the fact that the Iranian missiles, or rather U.S. bases in the Middle East, are within the reach of Iran missiles. So one option would be to target U.S. bases in Iraq, because Iraq's security is the least comprehensive compared to the other Arab nations, and of course with its proxy dynamics. The other options would be more critical and would provoke a wider escalation with the U.S. That would be targeting the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and of course the CENTCOM in Qatar. But this would of course involve deeper problems for the United States, would entangle it deeper, and of course would have serious implications for the Indo-Pacific.
Don, before we move on to the other questions, I'd like just to ask you something in related to what you said. Do you see this, the tensions escalating from an Israel and Iran conflict into a possible U.S. and Iran conflict similar to that of U.S. and Iraq?
Well, as I've mentioned earlier, it would depend on the degree of Iran's retaliation, if it would retaliate based on that. And as I mentioned, with regime survival at its most critical juncture in Iran today, it may result to irrational moves. And one of them would be targeting U.S. bases and military facilities across the Middle East. And that would, in fact, be seen by Washington as an act of war. And that may also eventually include certain Arab nations that would want to nevertheless remain neutral in the conflict. So that could, in fact, widen it further if that is eventually the way Iran takes it.
But for me, I would like to get your insights on what could probably what's at stake here for the Philippines. Should we remain neutral?
Well, here's the thing. For the Philippines, we have several implications. Obviously, our foreign policy dictates that we stand by international law. But there are wider implications that the Philippines must consider, and that is eventually the role of the United States as a security partner of the Indo-Pacific. Now, Mr. Donald Trump's first and second presidential campaign promises were based on breaking the chain of U.S. military interventions in the Middle East. And what occurred recently shows that an exit for the U.S. is in fact more difficult than it seems. So remember, America's entanglements in wars in Afghanistan and Iraq paved the way for China's assertive rise in the Western Pacific. China today is much more influential, economically developed, and of course, militarily strong. So China's threat towards Taiwan is greater than ever, bearing in mind the Davidson window. And at the same time, it has also been ramping up provocations against the Philippines, against Japan. So Iran, for all its clear insecurity, and of course, the insecurity it brings out, of course, a nuclear-armed Iran would be critical to the security of the region. It is not a rising great power, and its ambitions are localized compared to China. So the challenge now is for Washington not to be pulled into the brewing Middle East conflict, and of course to proactively shape the terms of its withdrawal to better focus on the Indo-Pacific.
Don, if given who the President of the United States is and how volatile he is, if this is not handled properly, what would be the effect on the positioning here in Asia, given that there is also a conflict of our own between your mentioned Taiwan, China, and the Philippines? Will this affect now how the nations in Asia approach our own conflict with China? Do you see China maybe dabbling into this conflict?
Well, every time the U.S. is involved, or at least in certain degrees involved in other wars or conflicts in different parts of the world, it's China that continues to benefit, whether it be the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and of course the initial wars in the early 2000s in the Middle East and in Afghanistan, and potentially this one, if it continues to draw the U.S. in. So in this regard, of course, this would play to the benefit of China. And of course, China is also a significant contributor to the development and support of Iran. And of course, that would continue to create more linkages between what Iran may eventually do and, of course, China, given the free hand in the Indo-Pacific. So that, that is a clear causal impact.
But wouldn't China see this also as a possible threat to their part, given that this could trigger, the defense treaty between the Philippines and the U.S.? If China dabbles in this issue, then we are quite near to the Middle East, nearer than the United States. Positioning-wise, they could use our bases. And likewise, we scratch the U.S. backs, they scratch our backs. Could something like that be happen? We'll help you with China, you help us with Iran.
Well, that really depends on what the implications would be, because obviously, as we can see, China has the quantitative advantage, at least. It has a geographical advantage here. And that would require more presence of the United States in this part of the world. And of course, and I think history speaks for itself. You cannot extinguish every fire in the region or every fire in the world, because you would have to eventually prioritize certain ones with global implications. And I think that is what is clearly seen with the challenge that China poses. Regarding our position, of course, we are located strategically in the first island chain. Right. We are also diversifying our options. We are working closely with Japan, and we are also working closely with other partners in the region. But at the same time, the role of the United States remains detrimental to the stability of the Indo-Pacific, and that has led to concerns as well among other Southeast Asian countries regarding where the future of the Indo-Pacific would lie, based on what would happen perhaps in the next couple of days.
But let's talk about the economic implications of this conflict. How vulnerable are Indo-Pacific economies to oil supply shocks if the conflict escalates further?
Well, clearly, energy prices are already taking a hit, and of course, if this continues to exacerbate, we could expect more of a critical energy crisis, much more, I'd like to say, than what initially took place during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, given, of course, that the Middle East is in fact the lifeline. And of course, we talked about the Strait of Hormuz. It's merely 21 nautical miles. It's a narrow strait, but it carries a significant percentage of the energy security interests of countries, along with, of course, the natural gas exports from Qatar. Iran sits on top of the Strait of Hormuz, and Oman and the UAE sit below. So if in that instance there are further detriments in the free flow of goods and trade in these narrow passages, given that they it connects itself to the Arabian Gulf, the Persian Gulf, and the Gulf of Oman, leading to the Arabian Sea. And for us in the Western Pacific, it has to pass through the Strait of Malacca and in the greater South China Sea. And if that is disrupted, and you already have ships trying to relocate and reroute their passages, that would also increase the cost for us. And then given the Philippines is a net importer, that would of course be problematic for us, especially as our natural energy resources are depleting by the day.
Don, I'd like to move the conversation a little bit to another major player in the Asian region, North Korea. Should we be taking a close look at how they will posture? Well, we all know they're very critical of the United States, but we also have to remember President Donald Trump has had interaction already with the leader of North Korea.
Yeah, sure. You're talking about that under Trump 1.0, but a lot has changed since then. And in fact, that sort of approach has not really yielded in anything substantial when it comes to the peace of the Korean Peninsula, but rather you see North Korea with its saber rattling. It just recently launched missiles as well. And it is clearly watching. It is clearly watching, and it sees itself as being the possessor of nuclear weapons, that it has the advantage compared to, let's say, Iran, which was seen to be developing nuclear weapons. And of course, the actions taken by the U.S. and Israel were to refrain it from completing the process, which would be critical to the region. But of course, with North Korea already possessing nuclear weapons, it may see this as an advantage that it possesses, and that could in fact embolden it to take more irrational steps in the region. So this is what I was saying, and this is the nexus that is forming in the Indo-Pacific. You have China on the one hand, you have North Korea, and eventually China has also been bringing in Russia, which is also clearly critical to Japan's exclusive economic zone and airspace. And eventually that could create more complexities in the Indo-Pacific with this nexus forming. So we'd have to at least address this at par with an equally robust deterrence. And that would only be appropriate or that would only be operationalized with a consistent approach towards the region.
Yeah, so what we are seeing right now is probably a retaliatory cycle, right? In your view, what could be the possible factors that these both sides will go back to the table and talk about negotiations?
Well, that is initially what the plan was, to make Iran feel the cost and to realize that the only way forward would be to get to the negotiating table, similar to what happened towards the end of the 8-year war between Iran and Iraq. But then again, as I mentioned, regime survival plays a huge role today, especially in Iran. And being backed against the corner, it may result to more assertive maneuvers and responses that may further deepen the crisis in the region. So, there are two schools of thought here. One is by defanging Iran, it would become less of a threat and it would eventually have to submit to negotiations. But on the other hand, it would make it more, it would force it to accentuate towards a more a harder hand in terms of its responses in the region. So there are two schools of thought regarding this, and the only way for us to find out is to see how this plays out in the next few days. Because as far as we can tell right now, all we can do is speculate.
Right.
But definitely, these are the two scenarios that may eventually fold out. And based on what happens, that would also have significant implications to us here in the region in the Indo-Pacific.
But with how this situation is unfolding, do you also see a possible rise of on terrorism, proxy wars in different countries?
Well, that's a given for sure. I mean, Iran has control over several proxy groups across Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and it would definitely maximize its leverage over them. And in fact, that you could even expect or may expect targetings towards U.S. diplomats, perhaps, or Israeli diplomats, or military officials of the U.S. stationed in different parts of the region. Most likely there would be more attacks in Iraq, given that it is less defended. It has a less formidable defense posture compared to, let's say, Qatar or Bahrain or Saudi. But then again, Iran would use all these instruments to its advantage and eventually may spill over in other parts of the world.
Don, do you see this conflict, well, whether it reaches its boiling point or not, do you see this causing instability in the Asian region in terms of how other countries would like to do trade? I mean, we all know Iran has an aging army and they would not want to go head-to-head with the U.S. And you were talking about proxy wars or pocket resistance or pocket attacks, however you may call it. Do you see instability happening because of this apprehensions most countries will have, how Iran will reply?
Well, clearly, I mean, we have been facing a lot of instability even before this particular development, and that has made the international system today even more turbulent than how it was decades ago. And this is, of course, one factor that would add to the already critical security dynamics of the broader international system. So definitely, countries, especially less powerful countries, are now trying to compute and trying to quantify what options they have. Of course, it would be a sensitive issue when it comes to how they intend to balance their security interests, their economic interests, and given, of course, the polarization of power in a region makes it an even more difficult decision to make. But nonetheless, of course, the most important part is to ensure survival in a very turbulent international political scene and to prepare. And that is, I think, the best way to go, to prepare for the uncertainties that are to be likely unfolded in the days, weeks, months, years to come.
But given with what you said about China making this or seeing this as an opportunity to push its claim on the West Philippine Sea, do you see any increase in military or naval activity in the Indo-Pacific region? And would the U.S. help us right now, given that they're clearly occupied with what's happening between Iran and Israel?
Yeah, so that was exactly what we were trying to point out earlier, is that when we look at the situation right now, given China's geographical advantage, we have clearly seen that it has been increasing its assertive and belligerent presence operations throughout the first island chain and even parts of the Western Indian Ocean. And this is, of course, part of its two-ocean strategy, which it has operationalized since 2008. Now, this would be the test for U.S. security commitments in the region, and it would be, of course, also a test for how the U.S. will be able to maintain its posture in the region, of course, given the constraints and resources and diplomatic capital in some parts, especially with what has taken place in the Middle East. Certain Southeast Asian countries have been viewing the U.S. in a more negative light, and that would, of course, decrease its diplomatic prowess. You know, how the U.S. would eventually try to make this or to address this and at the same time maintain a robust posture would be seen in the months to come. But of course, as far as we're concerned in the Philippines, we still remain actively engaged with our American counterparts, and of course, the whole aspect of the alliance commitments are still very much there. But of course, with loopholes in terms of in terms of the commitment and the consistency, rather,
Yeah.
that becomes a challenge eventually.
All right, with that, thank you for your insights, Professor Don McLean Hill, Indo-Pacific Research Fellow at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Thank you so much for your time.
Very much.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. Good morning. You're still watching News and Views here on One News. Congressman Paulo Duterte hit 1SAMBAYAN o isang bayan for urging countries not to receive his father if granted interim release by the ICC. He called the group's appeal an insult, insisting the international community had recognized his anti-drug campaign. 1SAMBAYAN warned that Duterte's release poses a grave threat to witnesses and could undermine justice. The coalition urged the ICC to reject his request and called the move a blatant disregard for human rights victims.
Now let's discuss that further with former Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio, now convener of the opposition coalition 1SAMBAYAN.
Good morning.
Good morning, Justice.
Good morning.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Let's get right to it po. 1SAMBAYAN has called Duterte's bid for interim release a grave threat. Now, could you explain yung legal and moral basis po of this position?
Well, because former President Duterte admitted under oath publicly before the Senate and before the House hearings that he organized the death squad. He admitted that he ordered the killing.
Yes.
He admitted full responsibility. He admitted everything. That's one. Second, he does not recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC. Third, he did not voluntarily surrender. He was forced to be brought there. No, so he does not qualify.
Yes.
He is a flight risk. Yung mga binigyan ng interim release, voluntarily surrendered. That's why they were not a flight risk. He is a flight risk because he refused to, he did not voluntarily surrender, and he also, that's not up to now, does not recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC. Secondly, he still has his death squad here in the Philippines, so he can intimidate the witnesses and the complainants, the victims, the families of the victims. So there is no ground whatsoever to allow him to be given interim release. No.
All right. Si Representative Paulo Duterte po has accused po your group, the opposition bloc, as a accused of hypocrisy. And what else did he say about you guys? What is your reaction to that? And he also said you guys are aligned with certain political blocs and of people who will run in the 2028, and you're just using this to discredit them.
Yeah, that's totally false. Totally false. You know why? Because we sued the House. We sued Congress. First, we were the ones who opposed the cha-cha of Speaker Romualdez. I lectured all over the country to oppose the charter change, and I even appeared at the Senate hearing of Amy Marcos. We were all against the cha-cha, and we succeeded. So we are not aligned with the Speaker Romualdez. Second, we brought a case before the Supreme Court questioning the transfer of funds of PhilHealth, because in the General Appropriations Act that they passed in 2024, they authorized the withdrawal of funds. We questioned that. That was directed against the Congress, especially the House. And also in the 2025 General Appropriations Act, we went to the Supreme Court. We questioned the constitutionality. of what the House approved because they did not give highest priority to education, and the Constitution requires highest priority to the education. We questioned the pork barrel of the congressmen and the senators. How can we be aligned to them? We're not aligned with them. We are questioning every move that they make that is against the Constitution.
Right, right. And he also said that you guys have selective advocacy, saying that you remain silent during past incidents involving Filipino citizens who were allegedly kidnapped or victimized by drug syndicates and communist insurgents. Your reaction to that po?
Well, we have chosen to be specific in our advocacies. First, those that violate the Constitution. No, yung peace and order, that's ongoing. Everybody complains against that, but we are very specific in our advocacies. Those that have constitutional impact. Doon kami.
Yes, Justice, ano po magiging potential diplomatic consequences that we could hold accountable sa mga states, no, that choose to host, in case po, host former President Duterte?
Well, I understand that there are only 2 countries that have offered to host those who are accused before the ICC. That's Belgium and Argentina. No, but that is their right if they want to oppose. But we will oppose this move before the ICC, together with the victims, together with the prosecution.
Okay, Justice, no, yung request for interim release, parang na-post yung ibang reasons po ng defense team ni President Duterte. May mga nakapansin po, although we are not lawyers, but we'd like to ask, ano po yung impact nitong sinabing statement ng defense saying that he will not continue to commit crimes? Kasi bakit daw not continue?
That is an implied admission of guilt.
So
well, that's slip of the tongue. That's implied admission that will be taken against them.
So, but do you think, since siguro maalam naman siguro yung defense team, may meron silang tactic, that's why they chose to use this route?
Well, they have no more choice because their motion that the ICC has no jurisdiction has been denied already. So, ano na ito? This is their fallback na lang ito. And I don't think it will be granted, and it should not be granted because he's a flight risk. In the first place, he's a flight risk because he did not voluntarily surrender. Pinilit siya. So, and he has friends who have planes. He can always go out of Belgium, no?
And isa pa po sa sinasabi nila, one of their reasons po para po sa interim release ay that for the former president is already old, weak, and no longer a political threat. So how do you respond to this po?
So he is still a threat because first of all, nanalo pa nga siya, tumakbo siya. Second, andyan pa yung death squad niya. The death squad. At saka remember, when he was president, he even threatened the ICC investigators. If they come to the Philippines, they would be harmed. Talagang, he's really a threat.
All right, taking this opportunity na rin po, Justice, that you're here to ask you about the impeachment case of Vice President Sara Duterte. Today po supposedly yung deadline ng kanyang reply dun sa articles of impeachment. And what happens po if si Vice President Sara Duterte ay hindi po mag-file ng kanyang formal answer by the deadline po today? Is that considering po that she is waiving her rights?
Well, yes, she's waiving her right to file the answer, that she will be declared in default, and the trial will proceed. It cannot stop the trial.
Okay. So
it will be very bad for her not to answer.
Justice, sinasabi kasi ng, I think, yung spokesperson ng impeachment court that yung word daw trial does not mean the actual trial, but also the pleadings and the remanding and everything is all part of the trial. Therefore, dapat daw wag sabihin yung Senate ay nagkamali sa ginawa nila. Ano po ang tugon nyo dito, Justice?
Well, first of all, they use the word remand erroneously because they did not remand it. Because first of all, while saying that they remanded it, they also served the summons and they required the prosecutors to file the reply.
Yes.
And they also asked for a certification. So technically, hindi yan remand na linipat nila yung jurisdiction nila back to the House.
Yes.
They were just asking for a certification. They could have asked that certification from the prosecutors. At saka they should have waited for Sara, the Council of Sara, to raise it. Dahil that's a matter of defense. Wag na kasi nag-aabogado sila para kay Sara by asking for that certification. They should have waited.
Eh, paano po yung request nila na sa 20th Congress sa lower house, mag-file muna daw ng resolution pag convene ng 20th Congress kung itutuloy pa ang impeachment?
Yeah, that's a minor thing dahil pagpasok ng 20th Congress, the House will have to renew the authority of the prosecutors. Kasi bago. And that renewal is the authority to continue. So that's just a matter of course. Hindi importante yan. Kasi talagang i-renew naman talaga ng House ng 20th Congress. I-renew talaga nila dahil panibago yung delegation nila sa prosecutors.
And also, what is your statement also dun po sa sinasabi na hindi daw po co-equal in terms of impeachment court ang ito pong sa Senate versus the House of Representatives?
Well, the impeachment court is a separate body. But hindi naman nag-aaway yan because ang mali lang ng Senate, they should have asked the prosecutors to submit that certification out of respect that is a co-equal branch of the Senate. Pero that's just a minor defect. It will not make it unconstitutional. Nagkamali lang sila sa protocol nila. But the House can just ignore that.
All right. On that note, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras. 1SAMBAYAN convener Antonio Carpio will be keeping in touch po regarding this matter. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Now, in other news, the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission, or PAOC, is now investigating whether abusive lending apps are connected to illegal pogo hubs. Here's the report.
After losing her job, Angie, not her real name, decided to borrow money through an online lending application last year.
Nangailangan po ako ayoko naman pong mangutang sa ibang tao.
With just one click, she was able to borrow 3,500 pesos, but she only received around 2,000 pesos. A large chunk was deducted up front as a processing fee. The app gave her a 90-day repayment term, but just 1 week in, Angie said she was already being hounded to pay. She was able to make her payments early on, which encouraged her to continue borrowing for a larger amount. One time, when she wasn't able to pay on time, she was redirected to another lending app and was urged to take another loan just to cover the first one. But it was just recently when Angie experienced what she described as relentless harassment after a delay in payment. She was bombarded with threatening messages and emails, some of which even dragged her family into the threats.
Kahit ilang minutes lang kamali, nakaranas po ako na tinext na nila yung mga kakilala ko. Kung kilala daw po ako, tapos po pakisabi daw po magbayad ng utang kasi po meron daw po akong utang, scammer daw po ako. Sabi nila yung pamilya mo, ipapapatay ko, hindi mo alam kung sino, ipasusunog ko yung bahay mo, hindi ka makakain, hindi ka makatulog, nag-iisip ka kung paano mo maaayos yung problema mo on your own. Kasi nga po sunod-sunod yung harassment sa lahat po ng form para lang matakot kanila.
According to the data from PAOC, over 13,000 complaints were filed in April and May alone.
Yan yung mga nag-report, okay? Ano yung mga hindi nagre-report? Tapos yung ibang hinaharas. ayaw nilang ma-expose yung ginagawang harassment sa kanila. To arrest o kaya patigil natin ito na ito. Ayan, malalaman lang natin yan once na napunan na natin ang mga statements, itong mga complainants.
The PAOK is now investigating who's behind these abusive lending apps and whether they are connected to recently closed Pogo hubs.
Don't go away because we're not done yet. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching News and Views here on One News. An international drug cartel is reportedly behind the seized illegal drugs in Zambales. Last Friday, operatives of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency and the Philippine Navy intercepted a fishing vessel carrying 1.5 tons of shabu. The estimated value of the seized drugs is over 10 billion pesos. On board the fishing vessel was a Chinese-Malaysian national believed to be a member of the Samgor International Crime Syndicate. According to PIDEA, this is the same drug cartel suspected to be behind the packs of illegal drugs found floating in the coastal areas of Zambales, Pangasinan, Ilocos Sur, Ilocos Norte, and Cagayan.
In other news, the Supreme Court has officially scrapped the second placer rule. This refers to the runner-up in an election assuming office if the winning candidate is later disqualified. The court said the rule has no legal basis, stressing that no law authorizes the proclamation of a second placer. Instead, the local government code's succession rule should apply when a permanent vacancy occurs due to disqualification. COMELEC Chairman George Garcia said they are studying the possibility of filing a motion for reconsideration.
Pero hindi sinabi lang na if what happens if same position kasi understood yan pag mayor, vice mayor.
Yeah, oo. Mabilis lang yun eh. Pag na-disqualify si mayor, there's vice mayor.
Pero this stems kasi yung in question yung kay Chua.
Yung sa congressman sa Manila.
Tsaka kay Congressman Abante, di ba? Oo. So ano yung implication nito? Will there be another
succession ng congressman?
Kasi wala namang succession sa congressman. Exactly. Will there be another election? Sana we can get Chairman George Garcia or spokesperson Laudianco to talk about this because
kasi apparently prior to this decision ng Supreme Court or decision ng restatement ng Supreme Court na proclaim na si Representative Abante.
Yes, that's right,
diba?
that's right.
Oo. So right now sabi ng COMELEC they will file a motion for reconsideration in this case.
Okay. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is calling on the government to prepare for the immediate release of fuel subsidies as global oil prices rise amid escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. Gatchalian noted that while the Philippines sources oil mainly from Saudi Arabia, global price spikes are already affecting local markets. The senator pointed out that 2.5 billion pesos in fuel aid is allocated under the 2025 national budget for sectors like public transport, agriculture, and fisheries. The funds can be released once crude oil prices average $80 per barrel. Gatchalian urged the Department of Energy to closely monitor price movements and activate subsidy programs such as Pantawid Pasada, which already has cards distributed to many drivers. The senator also proposed expanding coverage to tricycle drivers, stressing that they are equally vulnerable to fuel price hikes.
Rising global oil prices are raising concerns for local consumers. Joining us now is Rodela Romero, Assistant Director of Oil Industry Management Bureau of the Department of Energy, to tell us what's being done. Magandang umaga po sa inyo.
Magandang umaga po, Ma'am Angela and Sir Angelo. Magandang umaga po sa lahat.
Opo, hingi lang po kami ng reaction po mula po sa inyong opisina regarding nga po dito sa sinabi ni Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, yung kanyang panawagan for the immediate release of fuel subsidies.
Yes, ma'am. There's really a fuel subsidy intended po sa mga motorista natin. The one implemented by the Department of Transportation and LTFRB. They're the one implementing the fuel subsidy po for the transport sector. And then there's also another one na parang pantawid pasada din, same kind of concept na ini-implement naman po ng Department of Agriculture for those farmers and fisher folks na apektado.
Alright, ma'am, kasi of course we know yung Israel-Iran and tas ngayon the US conflict nag-escalate. But how will this affect fuel prices, especially sa Philippines, even if we don't directly get fuel from them?
Yes, tama po. We do not get directly from those countries, Iran and Israel. But considering po na may mga premium, may war premium sa pagbili ng petroleum products, so definitely po tataas ang presyo, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, but rather to the whole world. Plus the fact na it's only an speculation kasi ang ini-speculate nila in the event na mag-escalate talaga yung tension, there's a possibility po na sarahan ang Strait of Hormuz. Mas malaki po yung impact na masara ang Strait of Hormuz because almost 20% ng global oil dumadaan po sa nasabing strait. So at the moment, wala pang actual supply disruption. Pero may speculation na po, kaya nararanasan natin pagtaas ng presyo.
Sir, currently po, ano po ang price natin per barrel ng crude oil? Tapos ano ba ang speculation po if ever nagkaroon po ng escalation sa tension?
Kung pagbabasihan po natin yung monitoring natin sa Mean of Flat Singapore, pinaka-benchmark for Dubai crude, nung Friday po, Friday trading lang po, 76.85.
Okay.
Pero kung average ng, but for the month of June, 64.85 pa lang po. Wala pang ano. So, in the meantime po, regular ang monitoring na ginagawa po natin para malaman po talaga natin kung ano yung magiging estimated adjustment in the event na mag-escalate talaga yung tension.
Okay.
Well, to explain this further po, ma'am, kasi nakikita nga po natin bukas, tataas po ulit yung natin na presyo ng gasolina. Ano pong mga hakbang po, aside po sa nabanggit po ninyo, yung gagawin ng government para po kahit papaano po maibsan po yung impact ng rising of fuel cost po sa vulnerable sectors po natin katulad po ng mga transport drivers, public transport drivers, farmers and fisher folks?
Yes, at the moment po kasi, ang sinisigurado po natin, meron tayong supply ng petroleum products na gagamitin sa ating bansa. So, we conducted the inventory check sa mga depots po ng oil companies last week pa po. And they are all compliant with the minimum inventory requirements set by the DOE. And then second po, we have an ongoing meeting with the oil companies para gamitin po ang moral suasion na wag naman one time, big time yung increase na i-implement tomorrow. Baka pwede pong maging staggered. Kasi dati naman po, pinagbibigyan tayo ng mga oil companies na ngayon. Kaya na nga po, sana by next week or the susunod na linggo, hindi na ganun kataas para idagdag man yung balance, hindi pa rin mabigat. So, staggered implementation ng adjustment. And third, patuloy pa rin po yung appeal natin sa oil companies. In fact, may meeting din kami na separate with them, iba-ibang oil companies, para malaman po natin yung mga discounts na binibigay nila sa mga motorista, sa iba't ibang customers nila. Kasi yung mapapansin niyo po, may mga gas station na nagbibigay ng discount that range from 1 peso hanggang 5 pesos per liter. So, as part of their corporate social responsibility. Tapos may mga freebies din po and then mga promos. And then, sa ngayon din po, may nakaset kami meeting talaga with DOTR and LTFRB para makita po natin yung implementation nga nila ng Pantawid Pasada program or fuel subsidy for transport sector. And then another meeting with DA para naman po nga sa farmers and fisher po.
Lastly, Director, syempre, we spoke to several drivers groups this last few weeks. Pinag-uusapan kasi yung pagtaas ng pasada nila. Do we see an outlook of the next 3 weeks na puro pataas po, upward, or may chance na mag-fluctuate at bumaba ang presyo within the next 2-3 weeks?
Yun nga po kung mag-escalate po talaga itong tension na to, malaki po posibilidad na magtuloy-tuloy po yung pagtaas ng presyo. But meron pa rin po naman tayong mga tinatawag na lingering factors na hahatak na pababa ang presyo. Like for instance, minsan po humihina ang demand ng malalaking bansa kagaya ng China at saka ng India. Malaking tulong po yun para humatak ang presyo kasi bumababa yung demand, di po ba yung consumption nila. Second po, yung nakaraang imposition ng tariff ni President Trump, di po ba, naging issue din yun, nakahatak din po yun pababa sa presyo ng produktong petrolyo. So those are some of the factors that would trigger para bumaba ang presyo naman.
All right, we'll keep in touch with you, but for now, thank you very much, Rodela Romero, Assistant Director of Oil Industry Management Bureau of the Department of Energy.
Now in sports, Creamline kicks off its PVL on Tour campaign with a dominant sweep of Capital One on opening day in Vigan, Ilocos Sur. The Cool Smashers made quick work of the Solar Spikers, winning in straight sets on Sunday at the Chavit Coliseum. Capital One played without key rookies, allowing Creamline to take control in all departments, leading in attacks, blocks, and service aces. Next up for Creamline, a match against Akari, while Capital One faces Signal. Both games are set later today at the same venue.
AI-generated videos are spreading fast online, but how can we tell what's real and what's fake? Para bigyan ng mukha ang balita, Mobile Journal, JF Rivera.
Marami na ang nalilinlang sa mga AI-generated videos.
Oops, teka, hindi po ako yan.
Ito ang totoo. Sa dami ng mga AI-generated videos online, kaya pa ba natin malaman kung ang pinapanood natin ay real or fake?
Kakayanin mo bang mag-vlog sa mismong tuktok ng bulkan? Para iwas traffic, si nanay, nag-zipline na. At paano nga ba kung magkaroon ng zombie sa bansa? Realistic man tignan ng mga videos na ito, pero hindi po yan legit. AI-generated videos sa mga yan kung saan kaya nito gawa ng video ang kahit anong gusto mo. Kaya naman, kumonsulta tayo sa isang IT expert kung paano nga ba malalaman kung authentic o AI-generated ang content na napapanood natin.
Dapat maging mapanuri tayo. Kasi ngayon, ang hirap ng i-identify yung AI-generated video saka sa real video. So, ang authentic video kasi, karaniwang may consistent lighting, natural yung mga facial expression, pero dahil sa advancement ng technology, minsan din na natin ito napapansin. Ang galing-galing na nila.
Kung makakakita ng mga videos gaya nito, ilan sa dapat obserbahan ay ang mata. Ang karaniwan tao ay sigo-segundo kumukurap, pero ang AI hindi. Check din natin ang texture ng balat, na madalas unnaturally flawless kapag AI, ang galaw ng bibig, kung tugma ba sa sinasabi, at ang pagkumpas ng kamay. Pero isa sa mahalagang bagay pa rin ay kung saan nagmula ang video.
Ang source ng video legitimate, ang source ng video ay mainstream media. Kasi ang mainstream media, meron siya responsibility to verify kung ano yung ilalabas nila. Pag it's too good to be true, magduda ka na.
Nakakaaliw man panoorin ng mga AI videos, may malaking banda pa rin ito para sa atin.
Pero ang masama dito, pag yung AI mo, parang totoo na at hindi mo sinabing AI ang gumawa nito. So dapat kumilos na ang gobyerno para maging accountable ang meta sa mga nangyayari ngayon na mga scams, fake videos, AI-generated videos na nakakasama sa society natin.
Kaya ang paalala niya para makaiwas malinlang sa mga AI-generated videos online.
Iwasang mag-share agad. So mag-isip po muna tayo bago natin i-click yung share button. Kasi baka maging instrumento tayo sa pagpapakalat ng fake news at pagpapakalat ng maling impormasyon.
Hindi sa pagiging KJ, pero kailangan pa rin maging responsable sa mga bagay na sinishare natin online. Dapat maging mapanuri dahil baka pala ang akala mo'y totoo, yun pala ay gawang AI lang. Mobile Journal, JF Rivera po, hatid ang mukha ng balita.
Uy, alam mo na kapag try ako,
Hindi siya AI.
Akala ko, iniisip ko, paano ko sabihin AI ang pogi, pero hindi eh. Hindi, teka lang ha, nag-try ako. Alam mo yan, I've been making videos sa AI. When you post it kasi sa mga platform, you have to declare yung AI. But also sa editing app ng AI mismo, may mga limitations. Parang you cannot use existing faces of leaders, political leaders, celebrities. Bawal yon yung sa Google, yung AI machine. And to make an 8-second video, naalala ko nagpa-prompt ako na 2-3 hours. Kung hindi ka magaling prompt meaning ko ano yung details ng mukha.
Na ilalagay mo doon.
Kunyari may gout.
Panong context ng magiging
60-year-old Asian female with gout, in pain while talking, hindi kumain ng 3 Kailangan very detailed ng prompt eh. Kung hindi, nakikita mo, kung napapansin nyo sa AI videos, iisa ang mukha ng matanda.
Yeah.
In other words, kasi yun yung basic template kung hindi ka magaling mag-prompt. Oo.
Alright.
Kaya wait lang ha. Sa mga Indiana fans, sorry na lang. 103-91, nanalo po ang Oklahoma City sa NBA Finals Game 7 kanina. Of course, si Tyrese Halliburton napilayan ng first quarter. Mga OKC fans, take note of that ha. Pilay ang star ng kalaban. Wala, bitter lang tayo eh. Hindi na tayo eh. Di ba na, go Spurs goes next year. Ano?
Alright.
Ba't tahimik mo?
Go, 11 na.
And that wraps up today's episode of News and Views.
Join us again tomorrow. I'm Angelo Castro.
And I'm Angelo Castro III. We are One News.
All sides, all the time.